The Nosferatu property is wild to me. Its entire existence is just a knockoff of Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it does this weird thing to where not only do I like the knockoff, I also like the remake of the knockoff. I also like the other remake of the knockoff. If you gave the Nosferatu treatment to any other series of just changing characters' names around but hitting the same story beats, it would probably suck. But for some reason, this doesn't apply to Nosferatu. Not only are the original and the remakes good films, there's also a movie about the making of the first film, but the catch to the film is that they hired a real vampire to play Count Orlok in it. And guess what? It's a good film too. Shit's wild. The wildest thing to me about Nosferatu is that it shouldn't even exist. When they made the first film, they didn't have the rights to do so all they did was change the characters' names around like I mentioned earlier. This, of course, didn't stop them from violating the copyright, so Bram Stoker's widow ordered them to destroy all copies of the film. But luckily, during the purging, a couple of copies survived, so they printed a bunch of bootlegs of it. For a film that's just a knockoff, it became a huge piece of cinema history and of horror. There's plenty of shots from the film that have become iconic and ingrained in pop culture, like the one of Count Orlok's shadow ascending the stairs or of him coming through the doorway. Count Orlok himself has become an icon of horror and he stands on his own from Count Dracula. I mean, I guess it's cliche to say that Nosferatu is my favorite silent film, but I don't care, I really enjoy it. I just find it neat that a film that's over a century old can instill suspense just through imagery alone. Alright, I'll admit, my introduction to Nosferatu is from the SpongeBob episode Graveyard Shift. You know, the one where Count Orlok is flicking the light switch at the end of the episode? I know it was done as a gag, but it still creeped me out when I was 5 years old. And like all things that creep me out, I kind of deep dive into them because I feel like if I learn more about something, the less it tends to creep me out. So I did this with Nosferatu at a very young age, and I guess I've just been a fan of the franchise ever since. Can you even call it a franchise when it's all just remakes of the exact same movie? I don't know. Let's talk about Count Orlok. I said earlier that he stands on his own from Dracula. I also said that all they did was change some names around for Nosferatu. Well, that was kind of a lie. Not only did they change the names around, they also changed things like the setting around and they omitted a couple of characters. One of the big changes they made was that they have the film set place in Germany rather than Britain because the film was made by a German film company and they felt that the movie would sit better with German audiences if they shifted the setting towards Germany. Another thing they changed was the appearance of the Count himself. See, I like Dracula, but the thing with Dracula is, I know he's a monster, you know, he drinks people's blood and he lives in a spooky castle, but he's always just come off to me as a dude. A very sexy dude. I mean, in the book, he starts out as an old man, but as it progresses, he gets younger because he drinks people's blood. But Orlok could do keg stands of blood at your frat party all night, and he's still gonna look like a hideous monster. He looks like the kind of monster that you would check your closet at night before you go to bed. On top of looking more like a monster than Count Dracula, Count Orlok brings the plague with him wherever he goes through his rats, which kind of fits into his appearance because he looks kind of like a rat with those big front teeth and those pointed ears. So not only do you have this creepy ass looking blood-sucking monster roaming around, your entire town is also dying from the plague at the same time. Count Orlok is basically the third horseman of the apocalypse. The biggest change though from the original Count Dracula novel is that they have Count Orlok die at the end by sunlight. Oh yeah, spoiler alert by the way. Yeah, actually the whole trope of vampires dying to sunlight started with Nosferatu, because in the original Dracula novel, Dracula roams around in the sun and nothing happens to him. I guess it kind of weakens them, but it doesn't full-fledged kill them like it does in Nosferatu. Vampires dying because of sunlight or being severely injured by it has become such a staple to them that it even applies to Count Dracula now in some pieces of media. Yes, I'm counting Hotel Transylvania, that's serious Dracula lore right there. I like the iteration of Orlok as a vampire because it takes all the glamour of being a vampire away. You're stuck as this hideous creature for all eternity, the sun kills you, and also you're fucking alone forever. The sadness of being such a creature is shown in the 1979 remake Nosferatu the Vampyre. There's a German and an English version of the film. They're pretty similar because all the actors did was just swap languages between takes. They're pretty much the same movie.
The German version is better.
It follows the same story as the original Nosferatu, but funnily enough, they changed the characters' names back to how they were in the original Count Dracula book, yet they kept the exact same plot points that they changed from the book in the original Nosferatu movie, so it's like this weird hybrid version. It was directed by Werner Herzog, and Count Orlok is played by Klaus Kinski, who is so batshit insane they had to make an entire movie about it. I find it hilarious though that even in full makeup, knowing how batshit crazy Klaus Kinski is, Werner Herzog is still the scariest thing in this image. I know they call him Count Dracula in this version, but nah man, that's Count Orlok, you can't fool me, Werner Herzog. So in this version of the film, Orlok is portrayed as a pitiful creature. The sight of Jonathan Harker's blood, it makes him act like a strung out addict just wanting another hit. His centuries of isolation have led him longing for love, so he sets out for Jonathan Harker's wife, but she rejects him because he's this repulsive monster. And as revenge for getting rejected by her, he spreads the plague in her town, and in this version of the film, it's shown at full force. You'll see coffins lining the street everywhere, buildings are being boarded up, and of those remaining, they're just wildly carrying out their lives until they also die from the plague. So Klaus Kinski was a detestable human being if you've ever done any reading up on him, or have watched the movie like I have 3 times because I'm fucking weird. But the thing about Klaus Kinski was he was a really, really good actor, and his performance as Count Orlok is no different than any of his other performances. The creepiest scene in the movie is when Count Orlok is slowly creeping into Jonathan Harker's room while he's in Count Orlok's castle. There's like hardly any music, all you hear is like the ticking of a clock and the ambience of the castle, and he's just slowly creeping in on Jonathan, and Jonathan is just paralyzed in fear. It's like the closest I've ever seen in a movie to what sleep paralysis is like. You're just stuck there and there's just something across the room and it's making its way towards you and there's nothing you can do about it. For me, that scene strikes the same nerve as the hallway scene from Pulse. The uncanniness of the creature along with its weird movements, it just triggers that fight or flight response you get when you're out in the woods and you hear like an animal running, you just tense up. It's the kind of creepiness where you don't think about it much at first, but you're sitting in bed alone later at night and you just peek over in the corner where it's kind of dark and you really can't make anything out, and then your monkey brain goes, man, there's some shit over there and it's gonna eat my ass. And the thing is, I don't think that scene would have been as effective if Orlok looked like a regular dude like Dracula. No, he needed to look like a creepy rat monster to hit that nerve the way it did. I'd say give the Werner Herzog version a watch. I know the English version is free on YouTube, but honestly, I'd recommend you scour around, try to find a German version, because I just like it a little bit more than the English version.
I love it. I love it very much, but I love it against my better judgment.
There was a sequel made for the film, but it wasn't directed by Werner Herzog, so I just didn't watch it. Alright, I'm not gonna lie. When I originally heard years ago that Robert Eggers was making a Nosferatu remake, I peed my pants. It was just a little bit though, so it's fine. The man has made some good films. I'm a big fan of The Lighthouse in particular. It's my favorite film about 2 closeted gay guys having a mental health crisis. It answers one of life's great mysteries. Well, where do you fuck a mermaid? In the mermaid vagina, who would have thought? So the first time I watched the 2024 Nosferatu, I thought it was okay. You know, I liked it, but I wouldn't go to bat for it if somebody was talking shit about it. I've given it 2 rewatches since it's had a home release, and I love it now. It follows the same story beats of the prior one, just like the Werner Herzog version, but this one explores more on themes of sexual repression and such. So Orlok's design was revamped for this new one, and I'll just say it now, I like the mustache. I'm on team mustache. It fits perfectly for what they were going for. So he doesn't have his traditional rat-like appearance in this one like in the prior versions. What they were going for in this one was more of a traditional vampire look. See, in old vampire lore, vampires were basically undying corpses, so their flesh was rotting. They looked more like what you would expect from a zombie. And I'm a big fan of them going this route. You could see on the different parts of his body, like the back of his head where his flesh has been rotting off because he's been alive for centuries. He's still rocking that thick mustache because, of course, the fucking corpse of an undying Transylvanian nobleman would be rocking that. Look at this picture of Vlad the Impaler, the guy Dracula is based off of. He's rocking the stash. I'm not going to do a detailed review on the new one because this video is just an overall discussion about Nosferatu itself. But I'll just give my quick thoughts on it. Like I said, after the 2 rewatches, I really loved the movie. I thought all the costumes were on point. I thought the actors all brought their A game, the highlights being Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok, Lily Rose Depp as Ellen, and Willem Dafoe as the Professor. I forget his name, so I'll just call him the Professor. I find it funny that Willem Dafoe went from playing Count Orlok in Shadow of the Vampire to now fighting him in this new version. I thought his character was really interesting in this one because he didn't understand things like the occult or black magic or monsters, but he didn't deny their existence when confronted with them, so he's just trying to figure shit out on the spot, and I thought that was just really fun to watch. I hate to say it, even though I love the movie, that the best stuff happens in the beginning of the film when Thomas goes to Count Orlok's castle. The way that Orlok is hidden in shadow, the way his voice just booms and it has this power to it, and the way that he's constantly disappearing and reappearing around different parts of the room, it just made the entire sequence feel dreamlike. Don't get me wrong, the rest of the movie is very good, it just sucks that it doesn't reach the same height that that earlier sequence did. I do like that in this version they gave Orlok a little bit of a backstory. It's explained in one scene that he's the student of the Solomonari, and his soul was cursed to be forever stuck inside his body. That's how he's just kept living for centuries and why he's rotting. So being a student of the Solomonari, he's basically a vampire sorcerer, which really explains all the weird shit he's able to do in this movie. The disappearing and reappearing. In one scene, he controls the weather while he's on his ship. The way he's able to hypnotize people, and the way he's able to telepathically communicate with Lily Rose Depp's character, Ellen. Alright, I want to talk about Ellen. The biggest change that Nosferatu did from the original Dracula book is the relationship between her and the Count. Like I brought up earlier, Nosferatu introduced the whole thing of vampires dying by sunlight, but what I didn't bring up was that the only reason this works on him is because Ellen sacrifices herself long enough for Orlok to succumb to the sunlight. The build up to this happening varies across the different versions. I'm going to talk about the 2024 version because I thought that version was the most interesting take on it. So in the Eggers version, Orlok was an old shadow that called out to a younger Ellen's calls for sexual desire in a time when things like that were normally suppressed. People like to joke that Orlok basically cucks Thomas in this new version by stealing his girl, but if you pay attention to the movie, you'll realize that Orlok is more like an old abusive boyfriend returning and lashing out at everyone around her unless she submits to him. I mean, yeah, there's some bullshit in the movie on how she has to want him of her own free will, but then he basically strong-arms her into doing it by killing everyone around her she loves. I mean, Thomas and others are trying to kill Orlok, but she's the real hero of the story, her making the ultimate sacrifice to defeat the metaphors of her sexual desires. I thought that was just a real nice spin on the story. That aspect of the story was always my favorite change from the original Dracula novel. Instead of saving the day by going on this giant monster hunt, somebody willingly gives up their life because they care so much about everybody around them. It's both sad and beautiful on how this pitiful creature, after being isolated for centuries, just longing for love, he finally gets it, and that's what kills him. And a newlywed woman has to lose everything in order to put an end to the nightmare of hers that's become real. That last part mainly applies to the 2024 version and a little bit also to the 1979 version, but some variation of that general theme is present in all three versions. As you can see, I'm a fan of Nosferatu. I'm just glad to see that over a century later, it's still getting love. It's very rare for me to like every version of a property that I've seen. I mean, there was a remake that also came out in 2023, but I haven't seen it. I don't really have a desire to after the Eggers version. I liked it so much on the different things it did that I don't think I want to go back to just another retelling of the 1922 version. It might be good, I don't know, but honestly, I like the taste the Robert Eggers version left in my mouth. I'd recommend all the different versions I've talked about in this video, but if you can only watch one, I'd recommend the 2024 version. I'd say it's about as faithful as you can get to being a remake of a knockoff. Not to be confused with the other remake of a knockoff, or the other remake of a knockoff, or the pseudo-meta remake of the making of the knockoff.